Hey everyone, for this week's video we have an interview with the Red Star Simulations team. This is the team behind the MiG-17 Fresco. This interview is going to be completely different from my other interviews. In the past, I have mostly tried to steer my interviews away from what is being worked on. Rather, I wanted to talk about what was worked on and the thinking going into it. That way players could understand the module maker point of view. In this interview, we are mostly focusing on what is to come. What can players expect the MiG-17 to look and feel like? There will be multiple MiG-17 videos sprinkled into this video because we all know a picture is worth 1,000 words. Before we hop into it, if this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay. So if you're into that, please subscribe. Okay, GVad, thanks for hopping on. I hope you've been having a good day. I thought it would be a good way to start this by talking about a little bit about you and Red Star. But before we jump into it, I'll let you introduce yourself so people can kind of know who you are and who Red Star is.
Yeah, I'm GVad. I've been a fan of DCS ever since the crisis happened with the COVID. Kind of got back into flight simulation. I've been a real pilot for over 29 years now. GA stuff, nothing crazy. A little bit of Civil Air Patrol, search and rescue, and that kind of stuff. But been actually in simulation business or playing simulators since the Commodore 64 and the Ace. I don't know how many remember that. There was a game named Ace. So ever since then, I've been in it. The big revelation for me was in the first video game where we could actually do a proper flare, not just put the nose down to land. So that's how far I go back with video games. Now I did get involved a little bit into Microsoft Flight Simulator. Did some videos that actually became popular on YouTube, and I got some gathering. And I appreciate that, I really do. But then into DCS, we got even more into this simulation, onto development side, and yeah, that it kind of grew from one thing to another, and started off as far as DCS to kind of where I kind of started as far as module development was on the A4. Me and a buddy of mine, he's the other owner of Red Star. He was flew military planes, and we wanted to do a Top Gun F-14 versus A4, and kind of A4 wasn't flying properly at that time, and we kind of went up to the A4 guys and said, "Hey, can we change this here and there?" And they kind of said, "Who the heck are you guys?" Coming here and saying that. But after a couple of conversations, they bought into it, and we started doing the FM, believe it or not, as testers and advisors for the A4, and that kind of brought us into the module development, mod development at that time. And it from that point, we knew that the A4 wasn't going to be a module, even though a lot of people wanted it to be, and we thought it could be. But at that point, we kind of said, you know what? If we do this again, and we probably will because we enjoyed it, we're going to do this for a module, and not necessarily to make money out of it. The whole thing was to focus on the module itself, on the flight dynamics, because that A4, the way it flew, was just amazing, and it was something we really cherished. So after the A4 was done, and the guys from the A4, they all actually are in third parties now. We kind of said, "Hey, do we want to do this again?" He said, "Yeah, let's do something." And we kind of looked at what was out there, and we were really looking at the early airplanes. Reason being is fly-by-wire kind of destroyed aviation in our view, because that's a computer flying. You want the pilot to be in charge, and looking at what was out there, MiG-17 kind of stood out. And initially, it didn't. There was nothing special about it. It was just the MiG-17 was between 15 and 19, but it had been in wars. And that's kind of what attracted us to it, because as far as the DCS, there's a big community that loves realism and loves uh, realistic scenarios that happen. And always felt this was 17 kind of belonged there, and the what we didn't know was that this thing was, as we said before, this thing was a gem, because 17 is one of those airplanes that it's kind of hidden, kind of falls in between. But think about it, this thing is a Gen 1 airplane that changed the course of aviation. And the way I say that is, the reason I say that is because if we look at something like Vietnam, this is a Gen 1 plane that fought Gen 3 Mach 2 planes. And when the American airplanes came in, they were fast, they had armament, they had everything. But here comes this little thing, and just kind of taught them, like, hey guys, don't forget about dogfighting here. You can have all your missiles and all your stuff, but we can still dogfight you. And as it says that, if you watch Top Gun, the first movie, the initial kill ratio was 3-1 on the Americans' advantage, and that's because these airplanes wanted to dogfight something like a MiG-17. Well, Top Gun's created. There was a fighter school for the Air Force that was created, not known as well as Top Gun for the Navy. And after that, they kind of learned how to fight these airplanes. But the legacy of the 17 and these, even a little bit of a 19, is that after Vietnam, the Gen 4 planes they were looking at, guess what came out? F-16 and FA-18 and the MiG-29. And that was the lesson that, hey, you know what? Maybe this fast Mach 2 interceptors is not the only way to go here. We need to have something like other airplanes. And that kind of goes back to the 17. And then looking at the 17, that is an opportunity. That was an opportunity for us to kind of go, hey, this could be something. So, and then once we got into the development of it, as we'll discuss, you'll see kind of what the 17 actually does and what the 17 is. So that's kind of the story of our start. So
Okay, a lot to unpack. Very interesting, actually. Some things I didn't know about that you mentioned that I think is neat. So you were involved with the A4 team, which I actually did not know, but with the circle of people that I know that you're with, that actually isn't too surprising. So that is interesting to know. And interesting what you said about how the MiG-17. I'm kind of thinking. I think a lot in analogies, but the way that I kind of interpreted what you were saying is that the MiG-17 was sort of a big domino that kind of went down and started a whole bunch of other dominoes in terms of like inspiration for aviation design.
Well, it kind of taught the rest of the world that, maybe this fast, high altitude interceptors that you're focusing on, um, maybe that's maybe not the way to go, because you come across something like a 17, it will outturn you. Having said that, the 17 has its quirks, and I mean it is a Gen 1 plane. We'll get more into details later, but yeah, if flown properly, the 17 will spank these guys, especially if they don't know what they're doing, or if they're new.
Another thing that you mentioned that was really neat, and I would like to ask a follow-up question, is you're with the A4 team, and it became really apparent that the A4 was never going to become an official module. And then you guys discussed internally and said, if we were to do this again, let's do it for real. Meaning that you actually want to do a module, which obviously makes sense, right? And especially with the ambition of trying to make it as real as possible, or trying to give it as much fidelity as possible. So you needed access to the SDK and so on. So my question to you is, before we pivot to the actual module, what did, let me say it in a different way. That's interesting way to put it, because my thought about you guys being on the outside is I remember hearing about a MiG-17 mod being in the works. And then I remember hearing that you guys were trying to apply to become a module maker, and things got a little quiet. And then all of a sudden, the official announcement came out. So is that basically kind of how your understanding too from the inside?
There was almost correct. The thing is, when we sort of announced the MiG-17 a little bit earlier than we should, and the announcement was, look, from our side, this is only from the MiG-17 team, the Red Star, was we want to make a module of a MiG-17 for, that the one that's going to be an official module. And then they said, well, the implication of that was when everybody else heard it, hey, ED approved another module. And no, that's not it. That's not what we're saying, guys. We had to kind of backtrack. We said uh, the we want to be third party. We're not third party yet. But from the very beginning, everything on the MiG-17 was done with the idea that this will one day be an official module. Whether we make it or not, this was our goal. And that's how we worked at it. Now, what happened during this time, why it kind of disappeared, it really has to do a lot with the 3D model of the airplane. Initially, we bought what we thought was a good 3D model, and we immediately saw that that wasn't going to be enough. We needed to make our own very high quality 3D model. But and that as a plane that's not a problem. Where the really problem was the cockpit. The cockpit. Now, when we think about something like the F-16, it's a very organized cockpit, even though it has a lot of buttons. But when you look at something like the MiG-17, it's a rat's nest. I mean, it's got cables going everywhere, wires going everywhere, panels everywhere. When the Soviets built this thing, it was basically a something that was welded together, not really with the idea that the pilot was going to be comfortable and not hitting something. So that took a lot of time to make. So we didn't. Although we could have, we didn't go to ED until we were ready with our 3D models. As far as the flight model, we had all this time, about a year and a half, to work on the flight dynamics. And as both of us are pilots, both of the owners of the Red Star are pilots, uh, that was our focus. If you go to our website and see, the first thing that says, look, we are pilots that we want to make modules that are the best representation of an actual plane out there. And that's how we approached it, always. Because that was our kind of what we knew with the A4, right? That's what we did, that's what we knew. And we thought, well, everybody else is kind of come on board and and we'll work from the top down, right? So, and the top being flight dynamics. And as we did, uh, we had a lot of time to work on this, and it came out to be something that was uh, beyond our expectations. By the way, our flight model is almost complete. We do have about 98, 99% complete, so it flies like it's going to fly once it's released. A couple of quirks we have to work out, but for the most part, you can get on it and fly it. What we need to do now is do the systems, complete those, suspensions, damage model, and communications, radios, and all that. So that's what we're kind of shifting our focus to on right now. But the flight model is there, um, and kind of we're happy at that with what came out of it, and hopefully we'll get to see a little bit of it later on in this interview.
So what's interesting about this interview, I guess this is spoilers a little bit, but when I started doing these interviews, I was actually very cautious about never asking questions about the module that module makers were currently working on. And what I spent a lot of time was focusing on how they were developing modules, or rather how they were managing the projects and navigating the ED/DCS ecosystem, and how much time goes into it and what do they think about. But for you, it's been interesting because in the preparation for this, or the lead up to this, you're actually really excited to talk about the module and development. So I'm going to break my norm and actually ask you a lot of questions about the MiG-17 and where you guys are and kind of what's to come and what people can, I don't want to say what to expect, but like how it's going to be. So you did say something really interesting, which is about
Now,
quirks.
Before you go, let's not. I want to break everybody's heart right now. There's not going to be any dates. Okay, we're not going to say it's going to release by this time. The reason being, the development. Once you get into it, those who have done it know how time consuming and hard this is. So yeah, I'm sorry to have interrupted you there, but we'll talk as much as I can. I'll give you as much as information about where we are and what we have so far. But unfortunately, I don't think we can promise any dates. Let's just want to put
Oh
that.
no, no worries.
Okay.
We're in this community. We're used to waiting, so don't worry. It's part of the
2 weeks.
it's part of the process. But you did say something earlier about quirks,
Hmm.
and what I would like to ask, or before I ask, I guess I'll share from my standpoint. And I don't know if I'm just a black sheep or super jaded, but or one thing that I think about as a professional customer is I do think that. I think that module makers, or modules, I guess I should say, all have their unique quirks or points of differentiation. And if you think about some of the modules, they all have their different strengths. For example, and this is just me saying this, but for example, when I think of Razband modules like the Mirage 2000, the F-15E, I think of like radar modeling. When I think about Heapler, they do some things that other module makers don't do. Like Jester, I actually think is still probably one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen before. The sounds they put into it, like you can hear the creaks and such. And all the module makers have their different angle. And to start this off, when to transition into the MiG-17, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are going to be the particular quirks? And quirks, I mean in a good way. Like, what are the things that you think people are really going to learn to think about or to associate with the MiG-17 module?
Okay, being from the pilot side of this, I think from a development point, and I'm not sure that there is a developer like us where the two head guys are basically pilots and everybody else is, everybody else on the team is a developer or a SME researcher. So when it comes to our development, I mean, it was always get those flight dynamics right. I don't care what the book says. The book says this, right? But when I go up in that plane, it's a little bit different. And that's kind of what we first encountered with the A4 with the A4 team when we kind of came in and said, look, the A4 actually does this. They came back to us. Well, the NATOP says it doesn't. Well, you know what? Kind of like what Tom Cruise did. Take the NATOPS, throw it in the trash, right? I'm going to teach you how to fly this. NATOPS is the limits, but there's quirks to every airplane. So speaking of our quirks, and this is where I kind of go back to saying this is a gem with the MiG-17. I think our quirks is going to be flight dynamics. We're going to show some stuff that was not seen before yet in DCS. At least not to the point we have done it, where we can start off with first thing that stands out on the 17 is the engine. Like, okay, this is a first gen engine, right? So it's an axial engine and it spools up very slow, and it has what they call a zero line that is very very high. You can go ahead and show that first video, and then we can discuss after. The first thing we need to talk when we talk about MiG-17 is the VK1F engine. Everything in this MiG-17 performance revolves around this engine. Even though it had the afterburner, it was a later version of the VK1. It was still an axial engine, and it still took a long time to spool up. So from minimum 2,500 RPM and to the maximum 11,560 RPM it took 15 seconds. To make things worse, if we take a look at the graph of the VK1 engine, thrust versus the RPM, we can see that it actually has a zero line that was very high. The zero line is the line on the engine, on the jet engine, that produces negligible power. In this case, that line is about 8,500, 9,000 RPMs. So anything below 8,500 RPMs is basically considered negligible thrust on the MiG-17. What does that mean? That means we have to keep that throttle up. We have to go between 9,000 to 11,560 RPMs at all times. About 95% of the flight will be done in that range, including the approach and most of the landing. So right here I'm showing that's the range. That's where we need to be. That's what you have to get used to in the MiG-17 when you're flying it. You cannot be coming down below that. The second thing to keep in mind is because of that, unless we're at higher altitudes, above 3,000 feet or so, we never want to bring that power below 7,000 RPMs. If we go from idle to 9,000 RPMs, it will take about 12 seconds to get there to give us any power. That is a long delay. If we just bring the throttle back to 7,000, we will produce about 30% of thrust from the engine, and that is only about 8 or 9% more than idle. There's no reason to go all the way down to idle. So when we want to slow down, we can just bring it down to 7,000 RPMs, and then once we put it back in, it goes up to 9,000 within 2 seconds, and we get access to that power in 2 seconds. To kind of expand a little bit on this, we can see that if we take this engine performance, and I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit, in this case, I'm going to keep the landing approach a little bit too fast. I'm going to keep it about 340 kilometers per hour. That's a little bit high. We'll go over the landing later. And I'm going to reduce the throttle to idle. For a few seconds, everything is going fine. The airplane is slowly slowing down. Everything is looking good. And then all of a sudden, I'm seeing that airspeed starting to fall real quick. 270. I'm adding full power at this point. Looking at those RPMs, it's just taking forever to spool up. This slow, the airplane is starting to shake. I'm trying to extend a little bit, but there's really nothing a pilot can do if you get yourself in that situation. The airplane is going to stall and you're going to hit the ground. So very first thing to remember about the MiG-17 is this engine, the spool time, the performance, the thrust, and where you need to keep it. It's something that takes a few flights to get used to it, but once you do, it's the same as flying any other airplane.
That's neat. It's neat because it's quirky, and I'm trying to think. I'm actually. Let me think about this. Let me think I might put my foot in my mouth. Let me think about this really quickly. I don't think there is a module in DCS that has that sort of characteristic with the RPM needing to catch up like that. Actually, the only thing that I can think about. This is actually ironic. The only thing I can think about is the ME-262 and IL-2 Great Battles, because if you go down too low, the engines take too long to spool back up, and it's too late on a landing.
It's part of that. It's not just the spooling up. It's every engine has this non-linear thrust. I mean, there's always a dip. You saw how it kind of, for first 8,000 or so RPMs, it stayed pretty flat, that thrust, and then the last 2,500, 3,000 RPMs, that's when you got your power. So this nonlinear thrust exists in just about any jet engine. It just depends to what degree. Earlier engines like the 262 and even the VK1, that is, you really have to keep them up there in the RPMs. One of the this was a MiG-17 pilot that kind of came in later. He didn't work with us, but we showed him this, and he kind of looked at me and said, "You know what? You guys got this right, because he races bikes, and he says flying a 17 is like racing a bike. You have to keep it at those high RPMs to produce that power. Otherwise, it's if you fall under that, you'll be in a lot of trouble." And I kind of exaggerated there at the ending, but that what you just saw was experienced by a lot of our developers. They actually, all of them, they came back and said, "We can't land this thing. How are you guys testing this?" And I said, "Well, show me what you're doing." And they showed me, and I realized they were pulling the power back. You used to, in an airplane, you pull it back to halfway, 50%, and when you need it, you put it back, and the power comes back in. That wasn't happening with the MiG-17 because of that nonlinear thrust. So, yeah, they kept basically stalling just before, or the other thing was they kept it fast and they tried to bounce it all the way down the runway, and that's not really what you do with a 17. What you want to do is With the VK1 engine is you do have these settings. You keep them there. You have the RPMs, and you fly by the numbers. When you're under 3,000 feet, you don't want to come under 7,000 RPMs, because if you do, you may stall, and stall takes about 2,000 minimum to recover in a 17 or so. And if you stall, you're basically done in a 17 at low altitude. So that's why you keep that RPM up there the whole time.
It'll be interesting too, because not only is the engine old, because it's an old plane, but it has swept wings too, right? And there really aren't that many swept wing planes in DCS, so I don't want to say the effect is going to be exaggerated, but it'll be really neat to see how people start to wrestle with this thing, and that's kind of the thing with these soulful planes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the reason I started with this. Hey guys, I'm bringing this up for a reason. First thing for a reason. Maybe you should pay attention to it, right? So you avoid it. Now, again, this is like you said, it's an old engine. As a matter of fact, the early 17s that came with the afterburner, the Soviets were very worried about them. They had very strict limitations on non-war. They couldn't even go to 100% for training missions. They kept it at about 97%. It's just like 11,200 RPMs. Or at least they tried to keep the pilots there. They didn't even ever went into the afterburner because they were afraid of it. Now, there is some limitation. I mean, this is the first afterburner. We're going to add this eventually. I don't want to make it like some of those World War II planes where, you can break it real easy, right? But there has to be some limitations on the afterburner. Like it's 3 minutes at certain altitudes. Higher altitudes 5 minutes. At very high altitudes 10 minutes. But after that, it is going to start to break down the engine. Even 100%, if you keep it there for a certain amount of time, it will start breaking the engine down. So if you're doing a dogfight in real life, most of them last 2-3 minutes at the most. After that, you don't have enough fuel. You're going to either break off or you've punched out. So in reality, this is going to be very, very realistic when it comes to the engine and the engine performance, as we kind of saw it here. So there will be some limitations.
So one last question on the engine before we go to the next video. But yeah, you brought up a good point, because actually, now that I think about it too, with DCS, it's interesting because in most sims, I'm always looking at my engine temps, but in DCS, I almost never do. The only time I ever really do is with the World War II planes. So this might actually be, this is interesting because you're actually making me think. This might actually be the only jet in DCS where you actually have to watch your engine temps.
Yes, and there's going to be, now, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is what you saw in the cockpit, we saw in the video, this is all work in progress. The instrumentation is not working. Some is not working correctly. We just needed something to give us feedback when we were testing, not necessarily 100%. The RPM is, of course, 100%. Altitude is correct and airspeed is correct. But like pitch and all that stuff, we just needed something to show us. But having said all that, the temps, you are going to have to monitor them. And there's going to be, we will have a manual. We'll have some tutorials. We're definitely going to need some tutorials to kind of show, bring everybody up to speed on how to fly this, because you can't just really jump into the MiG-17. The way we've created and made it is the actual MiG-17. Let's say you're a fighter pilot and you want to go get checked out in the MiG-17. In the U.S., we do have a place in Santa Fe. I think it's called the Fighter Jet Center, and they specialize in MiG-15 and 17 checkouts. They take about 10 hours on average for a pilot that is jet rated for him to get checked out in a MiG-15 or 17. And the reason being is what we just mentioned. Is this big part is the engine. That delay, it's in aviation we call that thinking ahead of the plane, staying ahead of the plane. You have to stay ahead of the plane. Your mind has to be 2, 3, 4 seconds ahead where the airplane is going to be at that position. And with because of that engine specifically on the MiG-17, and because the MiG-15 has quirks, there's a special checkout required for those. So yeah, we focused on that. I spoke to the guy. If you want to pay $3,000, you can go fly in the back of the MiG-15. But for the same amount, you can fly in the L-39 front seat if you're a pilot. So there's a big difference when you're flying something like a MiG-15 versus other jet pilots, other jet planes. Excuse me.
So before we go to the next video,
Yeah.
actually, let's do the next video, and then
Okay.
I'll ask you my next question, okay? Because I had a question about SMEs.
What I'm going to show right now is a 6G sustained turn. We'll go over the runway, 720 kilometers per hour, about 380, 390 knots. Put it into the afterburner and just pull. You pull 6 Gs right here, and as you're pulling and you maintain that 6 Gs, it will actually maintain that sustained turn. Right now it's doing about 16.5 degrees a second. I'm talking to Will Ward, another MiG-17 pilot, airshow pilot. He told me, he said, you put it here, the airplane will stay here all day. I believe Randy Ball does this with about 20-30% of fuel, so he may actually pull as much as 6.5 Gs at this point, but the airplane will handle it. And then watching somebody like Bill Reisman, one of the early MiG-17 airshow pilots, what he did after this, he would actually go into a vertical, and in vertical he would take off the afterburner and do something else, but he had enough energy after this sustained turn to take the MiG-17 up into the vertical. So the MiG-17 is a performer. Over here, what I'm going to show is instantaneous turn. Now, it will maintain that 6 Gs, but if you pull more, it will slow down. You're going to be at about 13-14 degrees AOA at the best turn. So we're going to start off, same thing over the runway, put it into the afterburner, 750 knots or so. I'm just going to pull almost all the way back. This is going to be about 8 Gs right now. And at first 180 degrees, it takes about 9.5-10 seconds to do, so that's about 19.5 degrees per second average. And it will go from 750 to about 550 kilometers per hour. On the next 180 degrees, it takes about 13 seconds. So it's slowed down now, it's turning slower, and it's going to go from about 550 kilometers per hour to about 400 kilometers per hour. There is one more thing. You can overpull. The MiG will stall, so in this case I'm doing the same max instantaneous turn, and at one point I'm just going to overpull a little bit too much, and there goes the stall. And then once it stalls, it'll roll over and you'll end up right on the ground. So you do have to be careful when turning this MiG-17. But I do want to get into stalls separately a little bit later, because the stalls are actually a big part of the MiG-17 module and its flight dynamics.
I'm going to use the word feel, even though I'm just watching it, but watching that makes me feel like it's almost like a World War II plane. In terms, but it's way more. But it has a jet engine on it, right? So the first part is interesting because you could see that the airspeed's just pegged, and you are pulling, and it could like I think I'm paraphrasing, but like it could just do that for days. But then when you pull too hard and you just get too slow, then you saw the left wing just dipped over, and then it just eats it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this video, and I'll have to take it because at the end I do say we go into stalls. This was taken as an excerpt from a different demo video we did. Unfortunately, we're not going to show stalls because that stalls by themselves, it's a 15-20 minute video, but I'll talk about them. So first thing to talk about is a 6G turn. This is something that the MiG-17 is known for. If we go to an air show today, we look at the F-16 and they do the 9G turn. That's the thing that the F-16 does. Well, the MiG-17 has the 6G turn. So Randy Ball, Bill Reisman, I think definitely before Will Ward, who actually I talked to him very often. He's helped us out. A MiG-17 pilot also does this. He told me exactly what I said in that video. You put it here, you'll just stay here all day. It's a turner, but you have to be also very careful. What you saw there was I kept it at about 720, and that's about 6 Gs at that point. if you pull a little too much, you're going to slow down. If you don't pull enough, you're going to keep speeding up. So there's a balance to it. What makes it even harder for us, and it's one of those quirks, is we have a dynamic flight stick. So it has a different range, different input at different speeds. So we're gonna recommend this, that you use zero curve on it. Don't use it, because if you use curve on it, you're gonna put in the turn. You're gonna keep it in one spot, right? And if you slow down for some reason, that effectiveness increases and it will stall you without you. You're gonna ask yourself, what just happened? Well, yeah, you need that actual feedback. So one of the recommendations is, when you fly, if you fly this airplane, don't use any curvature. And I know that's hard. It's hard. You get used to it, trust me. So doing that 6G turn, you have to. I made it. I don't want to say it made it look easy, but you have to be right on top of it, especially with no feelings. And we try to get other stuff going on, sounds and shakes that kind of make up for the G's that you may not feel in a chair, give you a better experience. But yeah, it's you get immersed in it. And that's a 6G turn. That's a sustained turn. That's its best turn. You put it at 720, you're gonna outturn just about anybody, until you get to the F-16s and Mirages, at least in real life. The next one that I did was instantaneous turn. That's the one where you put it at about 14 degrees AOA. Any more, you're actually going to turn slower. Any less, you're going to turn also less. So about 13 and a half, 14 degrees AOA. It starts shaking at that point. You can feel it. We give pilot feedback, so you know where you're going. You don't have something that shows you your AOA, but just by the shake of the airplane, you get used to where it is, and you keep it there, and you'll actually slow down. That's in reality, that takes a lot of power. It takes a lot of poundage to pull back and get to that point, but it does it. And then as you get slower, it starts shaking. Now over here, I didn't show it, but if you keep pulling, you'll actually slow down. With the afterburner, you can go all the way down to 300. After that, it will stall. It will stall because the afterburner will just create too much AOA. It will pass the critical. Without the afterburner, you can go sustained all the way down to about 220. Instantaneous all the way down to 220 or so before stalling, pulling on it. So, yeah, and one big thing at the end was I showed the stall for a reason, because on the MiG-17, you will stall. You can stall the airplane throughout the whole range from 200 kilometers per hour all the way to about 720 kilometers per hour. If you pull that stick all the way back, it will stall on you. And it gave us a lot of pain, especially in the dogfights, until you get used to it. So it kind of forces you to be very careful with that stick, and it makes you a better pilot, I think, in DCS at the same time. So as far as stalls, the reason I showed the wing flip over, that MiG-17, I do want to talk a little bit about this. I hope everybody stays along with it. The stalls, if you're under certain speed, it will actually stall forward. The MiG-17, the way the Soviets designed the wings, there's a reason they look like the way they do, is because of stability, and it will actually stall forward. And if you talk to MiG-17 pilots, they will tell you, oh yeah, it's very nice forward stalling plane, maybe a little step, kind of stalls in the steps, like nose drops in steps. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward, except until you go to higher speeds. If you go at higher speeds, that wingtip is going to stall no matter what, and you will get a auto roll on it, which we've seen if you stall MiG-15 in the game, the wing will stall and it will rotate. So Yeah, it's depending on the speed, the MiG-17, whether you stall forward or you stall to the side. In that case, we were actually at fast speeds, so we rolled it over. Um, Now, the stall also depends on the altitude. So at lower altitudes, your stall AOA is like 18 AOA. But once you get up to 30,000, 34,000 feet, it actually goes down to 17, 16. By the time you get to 50,000 feet, you'll stall at about 6. And I think we have a video that will show some of that a little bit later. But yeah, so the dynamics of the stall change throughout the altitudes. The other thing that changes the stall dynamics, and again, this was a big thing on our 17 development. It was when we undertook it, just thinking about it was overwhelming. We did it step by step and got it in, but flaps changed the AOA, the AOA of the stall. So you put the flaps to 20, that AOA that was 18, guess what? Now it's 13, 14. So you can't pull as much. So if you're one of those that pulls the flaps down and wants to dogfight, you do that in the MiG-17. And you cross that AOA, you're going to stall it. And then it's hard to recover with flaps down. If you go all the way down, it changes the dynamics even more. It will stall at 12 at sea level. And then as you go up to higher, 12, 13, 14, 15,000 feet, that's when having full flaps down becomes very unstable to fly. With the flaps 20, you're still okay up until 20-some thousand feet, but with full flaps, it's very it took a while to get this. It's daunting, but yeah, stalls are very interesting in the MiG-17.
Two questions. With the MiG-17 with the flap controls, is it kind of like a lever that you can put at any percentage, or is it like a steps like the MiG-19 where it's like only 3 steps?
It's like a MiG-15.
Okay, so there's multiple. There's like a lot more steps. Like, what, 5 or 6?
Yeah, no. The way you do it, you put it to 20, and it'll go down to 20. And then if you go to 60, it'll go to 60. But then if you put it back to 20, it's not going to go to 20. If you put it to 0, it's not going to go to 0. You actually have to put it to up position to bring them up. It's very interesting. It's not too user friendly, especially if you have to do a go around or something. And you got the flaps down. You have to bring the flaps all the way up. You can't just say, okay, flaps 20, right? It's a little bit tricky the way it's done. So for the time being, for the testing, we had it easier, but the flaps will be like the 15 where you put it, but once you go to 60, it's going to stay at 60 until you put them up. Once you go to 20, it's going to stay at 20 until you put them up, not neutral. As a matter of fact, there was a reason why they had that, and it had to do with I don't think we're going to implement this because it may be too much, but there's a hydraulic pump that works. When you put it to 20, the hydraulic pump is working, creating pressure, and then when you put it to neutral, it stops the pump. But if you leave it at 20, that pump will still produce pressure, and it kind of wears down the pump. I mean, it's not going to happen over 1 flight, 2 flights, but over months, if you keep forgetting to put the flaps in neutral, kind of like the landing gear, right? You have to put it in neutral. It will wear down. But again, for the simulation in DCS, that's not practical to make something like that break after one flight.
We don't need oxygen bubble. We don't need oxygen bubbles in the fuel tank or the fuel. Yeah, no, I get it. Okay. So, do you want to go to the next video?
Yeah. Go ahead.
While developing the MiG-17, we did take our time and put a lot of high altitude performance stuff in the MiG-17. It makes it very interesting because you have to worry about angles of attack, you really have to worry about your airspeed, and it flies quite correct. Right here, we're 46,000 feet or so. I have the afterburner in. You have to have the afterburner in to just maintain, and even with that, at higher weights, you're not going to be able to maintain at 46,000 feet. You can reach it, but not maintain it. Oh, you can see how hard the airplane is shaking from turning. I'm being very gentle with it. Just nice and easy turns. Again, you can roll it out. Very nice and easy controls. Now, AOA has shifted. Absolutely no flaps at this altitude. I'm going to take it out of the afterburner here. The airspeed is going to start slowing down. And I'm going to put it in a stall. We're 45,500 feet. Let's just stall it right here. Here he goes. Okay, nose down. Neutral, neutral. Roll it out. No, not aileron. Use the rudders. Roll it out first. Roll it out. Okay, now we're going to pull up and very, very gently pull up. You have to be very gentle because even with this little pull, we got about 10 degrees AOA here. So pulling up, pulling up. All right, almost there, almost recovered. Okay, here we are, recovered 39.5. So we lost 6,000 feet here, 6,000 feet in a stall from 46,000 feet or so. So let me do another stall up here at 39.5. Okay, here he goes, nose down, roll it out, rudders, yeah, easy. There we go. Gonna roll it out. Okay, now we can start pulling out. Listen to that airplane, listen for that shake. Keep it nice and simple. And here we are, 34.5. So 34,500, that was 5,000 feet lost at about 40,000 feet. So about 1,000 feet less. It's about right. So actually right here I'm going to do one more stall. And I just want to show you this really quick. Okay, so it's starting to roll on. No, don't use ailerons there. Roll it out, roll it out. There we go. Rudders. Now I'm going to do a pull a little bit too hard. Oh, boom, there's the second stall. Okay, now we're in a double stall. So now the nose is even lower. And we gotta pull up slowly. It's gonna take a while, you just have to be patient. And by the time we recover, it's 25,000 feet, 25.5. So it took about 9,000 feet or so to recover from a double stall at this altitude. So now it will fly at 25,000 feet. MiG-17 is a jet that will fly these high altitudes. It just doesn't like it. It likes to shake a little bit and it takes its time turning, but it will fly up here. It's got very realistic performance. But once you get down there below 18,000 feet where it likes it and get it about half weight, 60% fuel weight, it will dance with any other airplane. So.
Okay, first off, that's great, but I'm laughing because this is going to sound so mean, but I'm laughing because I almost wish we weren't going to show that video because I selfishly just wanted to see the module on the server and just watch people crash and not know.
Yeah. The reason we show this because it actually does have high altitude performance. And I kind of went into stalls, and what you saw here was a normal stall. It's a straightforward stall. It was very imbalanced, and I used the rudders to keep it straight. But yeah, it was slow enough to where it stalled forward, and but the main part of this was it acts different. Once you start getting up at those altitudes, you really have to almost fly it like a helicopter. Like if anybody that's flown a helicopter knows, you kind of have to have very small movements on the stick. Any big movements will throw everything off. So yeah, it's very interesting, and yeah, we thought about that, kind of, and we told our tester, said, put the flaps down, these out, and he put them down, and he got into a stall, and he just couldn't recover. Because with the flaps down until you get to about 17,000 feet, any AOA of over 2 or 3 or 4 will give you a secondary stall. He just kept saying, he just kept going down and down and down. He's like, what's going on? Like, okay, pull the flaps up now. Once he did, he recovered. But yeah, we've had our fun. And don't worry, anyway, there's going to be plenty of people that are not going to watch this. They're going to get in there and go, what is this? Oh my God, I can't recover. And yeah. These guys know. Yeah, we do. We do know actually what's happening. You should have just watched the videos, right? So.
Yeah, you hear that? I mean, now people that are listening are now in the know. So you'll be able to tell who didn't watch the video. There you go. Let me ask you a hard question. So, two-part question. Part one, do I start with the hard question or the harder question? Let's start with the hard question before I get into the harder one. So, actually, I'll start with the harder one. So, for this module, you're not saying it, I'll say it. But what I'm seeing here is a point of differentiation between other modules. And I have said this before in my other videos where I mention things. But and this is a watershed moment for the game. So let me preface by saying that this is neat and this is cool because a new level of fidelity is being unlocked, which I find very interesting. And what I'm really seeing here with these videos that you have shared is some new engine behavior and more fidelity in terms of the flight modeling or flight dynamics, whatever the right way to say it is, which is great. So my question to you is, was there, as you guys were looking at the project plan and trying to decide, should we do this, should we not, I would imagine that a question probably came up, which is, should we really do this when other modules aren't doing this? Because in a way, this could be, with so many players flying the fly-by-wire planes, this is a big step for them, and it might trip some of them up. And I just would be curious about your reaction. And does my question make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does, because we've had this. We were contemplating at one point we put an easy button and remove a lot of this stuff because it actually may be too challenging for some people to fly it. And we looked at it both ways. Do we want to put this stuff with? First of all, this is daunting. To put this level of detail at 40,000, 50,000 feet, we asked ourselves, do we need to go that much? And it was one of those moments where we kind of, everybody was quiet for a second, and I'm talking about the whole team, not just me and Talo, who is the other owner. I'm talking about everybody, because everybody had input in this, and I take everybody's input very seriously. And do we want to do this? And the answer was yes. At the end, that was our promise at the beginning, that we are going to put this stuff and we're going to make this stuff and get it out there. As most, I'm not going to talk to other, speak with other with regards to other models, but with ours, we said we're going to put this, and even if it hurts us at some point, where there's going to be planes there, at 40,000 feet are going to fly a lot better than this one, but we had to stay true to the MiG-17. First of all, I told you this thing has quirks. It has a lot of them. We're just covering the big ones here. But yes, that was always in our mind. How much do we put in? And I am so glad that each time it was like, yeah, let's put it in. Yeah, let's put it in. And in the end, it was, no, we're not going to have an easy button. To kind of get rid of some of these quirks, we could take them off and have it. But I think what honestly what I thought about was, what really impressed me was multiplayer, because I played a lot of World War II. Because I like that. I like actually flying the airplane. I'm always fascinated by it as a pilot myself. There was a group of guys that flies the Anton, the A8, and that's not the easiest plane to fly. But there's this group of guys that fly it, and they're very, very dangerous because they know how to fly it. And my hope was always that, there's going to be a group of people that loves Gen 1, 2, 3 planes that are gonna, buy the MiG-17 and fly it. But the real hope for me was that there's going to be a group of guys that will take this one to heart, and it's once you fly it at the edge, like and when I showed 6Gs and all that, it's hard to beat, but it's very easy to get out of control at the same time. But if you're one of those that kind of focuses and stays specific to this one, like those A8 guys are on some of those servers. We all know who they are. Everybody that flies World War II planes, they kind of specialize in it, and that's kind of like my hope for the 17, that we get a group of guys that one is going to have do an aerodynamic team. Two, there's going to be there and be these killers that kind of go in, and everybody goes, "Oh, when are they going to jump us? I want to." And even better, let's go get those guys, right? Because they're a pain in the behind. So that's kind of my personal goal for the 17. And I think as a group, when we started adding these features to the flight dynamics, everybody kind of looked at it and said, you know what, let's go 100%, guys. Let's not hold anything back. And we did it. Now, one thing we're not showing here is that stuff that actually worked out because of this. For example, if you lose your engine, you do need to have that 20-degree nose down, to glide. It's gonna fall out of the sky. It's not gonna be one of those gliders. If we do a split S at 720 kph, which is the corner speed, you do need exactly 3,900 feet or whatever it was to do it, 1,215 meters. Literally, that it will do it exactly per book, and that came along because we put in all these little steps that made this airplane work at all these different altitudes. So, yeah, I know long answer, but yeah, I'm so proud of it. I'm so glad we did it. It's amazing, I think.
It's a very good answer. It's funny too because I feel like the answer is so tailored for me because when I fly World War II, I love flying the Anton. The 190 is such a fun plane to fly, and people either love it or hate it. So it's always funny because it's the people who fly the 190. They all know each other between all the different games. Like all the people who flew IL-2, they come to DCS and they just fly the Anton also. So it's funny, it's just a vibe. It's like a little gang of people, so it's funny. Now that was a harder question. So the hard question I had, and before we jump to the next video, which is about the DCS ecosystem, about the red versus blue planes. So great answer about really capturing the soul of the MiG-17. But then my question is, any sort of thoughts about how the module announcement was received by the community? It being a red plane, especially a Gen 1 plane. Any sort of thoughts let me say this a different way, or let me lead your answer a little bit of what I'm asking about. But I have a suspicion, which is that most of the popular modules in the game are all the MFD planes, and the MiG-17 is probably the opposite of that. And just kind of curious on your general reaction of like the red I don't say red versus blue, but you didn't have to pick the MiG-17. You could have done F-105 or whatever. So I'm just kind of curious of your general reaction of the whole red versus blue thing.
Yeah. The 17 was what we thought was something easier. I kind of went over why we picked it. We thought it turned out that it's very complicated, especially flight dynamics. But as far as the flight dynamics, reception of the MiG-17. Now, I think most of it is neutral. I think it's one of those planes where people kind of looked at it and most say, yeah, okay, another another old one, whereas everybody wants to see a F-22 and one of these newer planes. That's understandable, but that's not that's not the. I even told our guys, when this comes out, there's going to be good stuff, bad stuff. Just stay focused. Just you did an amazing thing. So far we have put out something that's really, really, really good and something you should be proud of yourselves. Everybody was kind of a rookie almost when we started this, and we kind of came together and learned. But the reaction was either neutral, which was okay, or good. There's people that are actually waiting for Vietnam and Sinai and all those from 1960 to 1975 wars, right? So there was enthusiasm or neutral. There wasn't any negative that I saw. or that I heard. If I did, they hid it from me, and okay, it's just fine. But yeah, the as far as the flight dynamics of, oh, it's another red plane. It's again, we picked it because for the reason I said, not because it was red or blue or neutral. And we also picked it as the first plane. So our thing was, let's do something, to kind of initiate ourselves, and then kind of uh, give them a big punch, right, with something else. So it's but it's still our baby. This is our first baby, and somebody called it ugly. One of the different somebody was talking to and said, "Oh, that's an ugly plane." I said, "Don't call my baby ugly. Even if it's ugly, I love it." Right? But at the same time, this baby, we want to get rid of it, right? Get it out of the out of the crib, get it out there. So we're kind of eager to get it do that, but it's. Again, it wasn't thought as when we picked it. It wasn't thinking about dynamics and all that. We thought about, hey, what could be popular, at least in some circles, and not that systems challenging. So, and 17 came out. So that was our flight. Now, if we look, and we are looking at other stuff, that's gonna, you take a lot of that other stuff into consideration now. So, um, yeah, it was a starter project, and now let's look at some other good stuff, right?
The landings in the MiG-17 really have to be done by the numbers, and that is mostly because of that engine's spool-up time. You really have to have that power in. You have to be above 7,000 RPMs at all times. You have to be patient in some cases. Just trust the process that the airspeed will drop once you come below 8,000 RPMs. So we're set up here on the downwind. We got about 10,000 RPMs. I got landing gear down, first set of flaps down, 20 degrees. And about 10,000 RPM should keep it about 360 kilometers per hour. That's where we want to be. Then once we're at a 45 degree to the runway, we're going to reduce that power to about 8,000, 8,500 RPMs. Put the flaps down fully and start that turn onto the base. Now, during this time, the airspeed is going to drop. Control that airspeed using the pitch. Don't let it go below 310, 320 kilometers per hour. That's where you want it. The rate of descent should be anywhere between 4 to 6, 7 meters per second. That's acceptable. Any more is not good. Leave that power in. If it looks like we're a little high, just reduce a little bit of power. If it looks like we're low, just add some power. And then as we turn on final, we're going to go from about 320, 310 kilometers per hour to our final approach speed. In this case, 265, 270 kilometers per hour for the weight of about 4,200 kilograms. Now, once we're on this final, this RPM needs to be above 8,000 RPMs. And you can get into trouble if you have it lower than that. Control your airspeed using the pitch. So just pitch up a little bit to slow down the airplane, get that airspeed going. But make sure that that power is in there, because if the power is not in there, that airspeed is going to slow down on you slowly. And by the time you realize it, the airplane is going to start shaking and you're going to be in trouble. So just keep it there, 8,000, 8,200, 8,500 RPMs, depending whether you got external fuel or weapons, and that should keep it right there. This is the picture we want, and then only minor throttle adjustments. Once we get over the runway, we can reduce the throttle fully. And then remember, we cannot pitch too much because we get a tail shock at about 12 degrees of pitch, so just minor slight pitch to about 9 degrees and nice touchdown right where we should be. So as long as we're on the numbers, the airplane is nice, easy, stable, and the airplane will do what you expect it. Again, that's the end of these videos. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Trust the process. So, 265,
Yeah.
275, I think you said landing speed. So, what's the stall speed on that thing?
Okay, so we have to be very careful of that, because the approach speed, and we'll have this in the manual, and it depends on the weight. So at 4,200 kilograms, whatever that was about 265. And at 4,500 kilograms, you have to be about 275. And at we've landed at 6,000, although it's not good. 6,000, which is all max speed. You need to be at about 320 on final. So it very depends, and I haven't shown it here because we only can show one landing. But for the demo video we showed several different landings at different weights, and you just have to know the weight of your airplane and then use the proper speed. It changes that much. So as far as stall. Stall is depending on the angle of attack. Honestly, it's not if you're doing a dogfight and you're up there and you're, let's say, 150 kilometers per hour. Well, technically that's non-flyable, but your nose is coming down. You're not going to stall it. You're going to be in some sort of a control. But if you increase that angle of attack, you're going to stall it. As far as what's minimum controllable airspeed, where you can fly it, it's about 225 is at at the lighter weights. So at 225, you can fly it barely. One thing that we haven't talked about that has been a big thing, and this actually is a part of this, we do have second segment drag. When you saw that first crash, we saw that airspeed kind of started going down slow, and once you get into that second segment drag about under 290, it starts speeding up because that actually drag increases, and we have added that. So at about 225 is the minimum you can fly it, and that's if you get slowly into it, and if you have time, if you have actually space to recover, because as soon as you go under it, you'll fly and you're not necessarily going to stall, but you're going to be into that trouble zone. It will just go and straight into the ground. So yeah, it's before you go, I did ask this. This was a good question because I asked Will. He's a buddy of mine now. He said, "Will, what does it feel like at 130 knots, which is what, about 220?" He said, "I never been there." All right, yeah, unless you're landing, no, he's not going to bring it. So these older planes, he said, you know what, you keep it above, above 200 knots, way above 200 knots. So you don't want to be slow in these airplanes. They're bricks.
It's interesting. There's that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And these videos, thank you, by the way, because I feel like it has made the interview, you could say a lot more in a lot less time with the videos. So I feel like, well, I know for me, I feel like I know a lot more about the module than I did before, because it is interesting. Just to share my perspective. Again, I'm a professional customer, but we heard about the announcement, but we hear about announcements all the time, and it's like sometimes we don't really know like what's to come until like a month before it releases, and then we kind of get an idea. But this is good. I like it. It's nice. It's nice to know what's to come. It's nice also to know how far it's come too, because before I saw this video, I was still expecting an untextured module. You know what I mean? You just don't know. Like how far
it is still untextured. It just flies. You have to be careful about it because there's a lot what you said, and the big part about this is not because we wanted it this way. It just worked out this way. We had all this time where we were working on the 3D model, and we had time to kind of we couldn't really work on the systems. Technically we could until we had the moving clicking cockpit and all that, so we were sort of forced to work on the flight dynamics and stay there. And I think it's a bit unfair to kind of maybe compare us to somebody else that, yeah, we can show it because we have it, but we don't have any systems. Now other people can come here and show the systems, and we'll say, you know what, we don't have that yet, right? So but with the flight dynamics, I mean, again, being both pilots, focusing on that, having things worked out this way, I think we're lucky that I'm able to show this. I mean, there's a lot of people that put a lot of work into this. And I don't want to be the face of it, at least not the voice of it, especially. But it's we were fortunate to be able to do that, and it's just the way things worked out. So just because you saw that doesn't mean the module is ready to go. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, as much as other people have at this stage. We just have to kind of, instead of building the house at the same time, we kind of build it room by room. We still have like quite a few rooms left to build. It's just not this particular room. So
Let me ask you a question. You're probably going to say no, which is fine, but I'm curious. Have you ever heard of this guy named Davey, aka Davey Wavy Boo?
doesn't sound familiar. I may have
All
heard
right.
what he did.
So he's a DCS player. He is, just so you know, he's the number one MiG-17 fan, and
Okay.
he had one question, or actually he had a lot of questions, but we covered a lot of them. One question he had, sorry, two questions that he had, because this guy is like the most extreme MiG-17 lover, and I think other people would like his questions too. But one, any sort of ideas of like how many, like what sort of liveries will be coming with the module? Like, because I know it's interesting if you look at the current, or sorry, past operators of the plane, like everyone and their sister flew this plane. So,
Well, what is it, 69 or 70 countries? I mean, it was ridiculous amounts of countries. And that's a good question because we just discussed this with our livery guy. He's very eager to start doing this. Initially we were like, well, we need to keep the size of this one small, right? Well, there's ways around it. So we found probably ways where we can have maybe, and I'm not promising this, please don't hold me to this. Initially, we wanted about 15 liveries, but we may have found a way to bring it up to 25. Again, this may not happen, but we're going to do our darnest to try to get this. Definitely Soviet, Chinese, Polish. Well, I mean, it is a Lim 5. It's a Polish-built MiG-17, and East German, definitely Egyptian, Syrian, and the big ones. But then we do want some, others that are not represented in DCS. I mean,
Somalia.
in Nigeria or somebody, right?
I don't think there's a single Somali skin in DCS, but but yeah, no, I hear you.
or Albania, for example. I mean, they flew the MiG-15s up until 1990s, 2000s, right? In 2000, they kind of sold them all off. But yeah, these guys, they had these 17s. So there is a lot. I really wish that there was a way where other people could see your liveries that they don't have downloaded. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. That way, you can just go get what you want, and everybody can see it. But yeah, whoever Dave, you know what? If he wants something specific, just go ahead and send it to me, and let him make the request, and I'll see what we can do for him.
Last question from Davey, and I don't think this is going to be possible. I'm assuming it's going to be a DCS limitation, but the MiG-17 does have a very interesting afterburner. It looks a little wild. It looks like my old stove. I have this old janky apartment I lived in, but any sort of I'm guessing that's going to be limited by DCS, right? Like all the afterburners kind of have to. They're kind of, I don't want to say stock, but we're not going to get the crazy flame that's like sputtering out, right?
Actually, we did kind of have something like that in mind. How is it going to work out? We'll see. Initially, we put that in. We did put we do special flames. How it's going to be put in, we're trying to do it. We're trying to do it, and I think we may have a way. We found one way, sort of worked, and we'll see if we can actually have it. Yeah, the 17 has that special afterburner just because it's like one of the first things. It's literally two hoses. If you ever look at the inside the MiG-17 or the VK1F engine, there's literally just two hoses that kind of spray the fuel into the after the turbine. So
I have one last question, which I'll leave at the very end. But we've been talking for a while. Anything else you want the people, the community, to think about as they they think about this module and as they wait for this module? We only got 2 weeks more, so I mean, what else do they want? What do you want them to think about?
DCS has been, for the most part, it's a very, very good community. We do have our black sheep, that's fine, right? But everybody was, for the most part, supportive and helpful. And yeah, we do have our jokes. So nothing really to ask of them. I mean, you guys, thank you for even being interested in something like the MiG-17. I would ask them to give it a chance. When we start hopefully coming out with some of the videos when we get closer to release on how to fly it, see it, look at it, see if this is something that appeals to you. Don't be limited by the flashy new things. The as a pilot, first time I turned on the autopilot was like the saddest day in my life. I turned it on and I kind of said, I don't like this, and I turned it off, right? Because I wasn't flying; it was something else flying. I was just a passenger, and that's how I feel sometimes about high-tech planes. I kind of like it, and I think people, not everybody, it's not for everybody, but if keep your mind open if you're one of those, and give it a chance. Take a look at it and see what we have to offer. That's all we can ask.
Good way to put it. I agree. It's just, the joke is I always say it has soul, but it's kind of hard to describe. It's just it has a soul, and you're part of it, and it's fun, and it doesn't put you to sleep. You have to be engaged, because if you're not, you're gonna.
Yeah.
If you're not engaged, and if you're not watching this video channel, then you're gonna crash on landing.
No, you will. If eventually, you'll post a comment on Facebook. Why can't I land this thing? And someone will say, watch the video, right? So yeah, it's like you saw. The landing was by the numbers. Literally, you have to put it at those numbers. If you don't, something will go wrong, and you can recover. It doesn't mean you're going to crash, but you're going to get out of the groove, and in real life that would be an automatic go around, or abort the landing, right? In DCS, who cares if you crash or if you break something? But yeah, so it's very, very, it's one of those planes where it's good, and it promises it does what it does in the flight range, but once you get to these edges, that's where everything starts going crazy, and that's where unfortunately, as a fighter pilot, that's where you have to be, right at that edge, if you want to be a good one. So it's going to be a challenge.
Last question, and this is a selfish one, but I'm just curious. I think I might actually know the answer, but we, just so everyone knows, we did not talk too much. This is our first time on voice, so we only traded messages and DMs before. But and I've never asked this question before, but I am curious. But why hop on an interview? I'm curious. Why me? Well, I guess why do an interview, and why me? I'm kind of curious to see where your head's at.
A couple of reasons. One is we do want to showcase this, right? We do want to. It's very, very important, I think, for us, specifically what we've shown. Kind of a couple of big parts that we've shown for a proper introduction to this MiG-17. We started off with the engine. Look, guys, focus on this. The reason we're bringing this first up, because the first thing you see sticks in your head, right? So that's why we started it this way. You're easygoing, so I saw some of the interviews, and I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Not too technical. I'm a pilot. Don't ask me technical questions, okay? I'll bring Arno, our our research guy, and our engineers to answer all the technical questions you want. For me, I'll talk passion, because flying is my passion. I love it. So that's why. And then the selfish reasons is, what? We've put in 2 years plus of work in this. There's a group of people that are still with us, some that came in for a little bit and left. Well, they will all be thanked. Everybody that's left, and there's not that many, we've parted on good terms and have always been that way. So I kind of wanted these guys to show it. I told our texture guy, he was a newbie when we started. He'd only been texturing for 6 months. When the time came to show this off to ED, I said, you realize that when we show this to ED is going to post this, and you are in the NBA, buddy, in the big leagues right now, right? And you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, whenever that we started, this was not even a dream. We were just trying to do a mod, right? A texture it. And that was a sobering moment. And it is, take pride a little bit in it. Uh, um, I try to be humble. I mean, as humble as a pilot can be, but at the same time, we are proud of what we have, and we showed a little bit. I hope to generate some excitement, even for personal reasons, right? Because we want people to see what we did. We are proud of it, so that's why I decided to give some of these videos and show them and talk about it.
I like it. I encourage everyone to check out the project. Keep in tabs with it. I'm hearing passion and support in this project, so I'm looking forward to it. Very soulful. I look forward to seeing a lot of people crashing and on final. I will be there laughing on the taxiway.
Okay.
And no go arounds. Just commit, trust the process, and just land it.
Once you get used to it, it's only hard the first couple of times. After that, you get used to it, right? So.
All right, GVad. I appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on, and trust the process, everyone.
Trust it. Thanks, Enigma. Thanks, guys.